Hello and welcome to the Landlord Zone. We are here today with myself, Nigel Lewis, Head of Content and at Landlord Zone, and Paul Shaplina, founder of Landlord Action, and we have Suzy Hershman, who is now, I've got to get this right because it's quite a long title. So you are the resolution expert at mydeposits and Property Redress.
Correct.
I think your job is much more exciting than that, but...
The day-to-day is a bit more involved.
Yeah, I think it'd be fair to say that your job is to really help landlords, tenants and agents sort out quite intractable and quite sometimes fruity problems, isn't it?
On a multitude of things.
Different things.
Yes.
Okay, so today, why are we here today? Well, we're here today because we are going to talk about the 5 tips that Suzy has put together for landlords about how to run a tenancy, in reality, I think we can call that,
Yes.
without too many trip-ups, to use the polite way of putting it.
We can try and help.
We can try and help. So we're going to go through those 5, then Paul and I are going to dive in for the next 5 minutes, and we're going to dive in and ask you questions. You can tell us to go away if you don't want to answer them, but that's how we're going to do it. So, yeah, do you want to kick off? So number 1.
Okay, number 1, I think let's start at the beginning and build the right relationship right from the point of...
You mean the relationship with the tenant?
Relationship with the tenant. Once you know they're going to move in, you need to make sure everything's in place, be open, transparent, approachable, which is key, I think. Yes, you're running a business, but at the end of the day, the tenant wants a home. So I think it's remembering what that relationship needs to look like from the beginning. Make sure the tenant... you manage their expectations, really. Have they asked you to paint a wall somewhere? You know, make sure you do it ahead of time. I'm obviously coming from the back of the conflict that we see when we get a decision to make. But you can be really nice when the tenant moves in. It builds a really good foundation.
Wouldn't it be nice if it was always nice?
Yeah.
I know.
Wouldn't it be?
Cuddlyresolution.com.
Buy them a box of chocolates.
No,
Find
yeah.
out what they're like. Have they got children? Buy them a
Bottle of wine in the fridge.
Can I dive in, because I think it's really important.
Yeah.
So you look at tenancies. You have landlord doing it himself. Maybe use a let-only service or online. You have agent doing it.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. It's about setting the scene early doors. The problem you have is landlords and agents historically don't spend the time in putting that effort in early doors. When the tenants are going to get their keys, it's when they're nicest because they want the keys. But the biggest problem that we have in the landlording arena is landlords don't see themselves as professionals, right? It's a profession, right? So go over the tenancy agreement, understand what you can and can't do. You could be dealing presumably with a tenant as they've been renting for the first time, or what you can and can't do in the lease with regard to common parts. I think is that a big problem that we come across?
So I think there's 2 things. One is when I go out and train people, agents, landlords, doesn't matter who, I talk about the start being the foundation. It's like the roots of a tree. If you don't have those roots in place, that tree is not going to stand up and it's not going to work, you know? So I think you're absolutely right. I think one of the best things I've ever seen is a 10-point laminated guide that a landlord gives to a tenant.
Do's and don'ts.
Do's and don'ts at the beginning and throughout the tenancy, with numbers on to contact. So everything's all in one place.
Communication.
It's all about communication. And actually, like everything in life, it's about collaboration. Because actually, if you work together, there's not going to be any problems.
So would you say that a landlord should be there when they move in, regardless of whether an agent's running it or not? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think personally, it's very subjective.
I know.
You know, if you're a landlord with 50 student properties, you're not going to be there.
Or you live 70 miles away.
Yeah.
Or you live 70 miles away. I mean, Paul, you would know how many landlords are accidental. So they don't live near the property they may have inherited or come by.
Yeah, I mean, look, 85%, 88% of landlords out there between 1 and 3 properties, of which we're seeing landlords exit for another reason. But
yes.
that is part of the issue. And I see, and we talk about conflicts, and I'm out on the road and like you training all the time, is landlords don't invest that time, that energy, understand education, and don't think about evading disputes. They don't see 6 to 8, 12 to 10 months down the line. Because what's the name of the game? The name of the game is have a happy tenant, happy landlord, it's my home, stay in the property as long as possible, keep a great tenant. That's what it's about, isn't it?
That kind of brings me on to my second point, actually.
That's a segue.
Go.
There's a
Nice segue.
Thank you. Setting expectations. So right from the start, and it's not just for the tenant. Landlords need to manage their own expectations. You know, look at wear and tear, which we know is a common problem when it comes to resolving, having a negotiation, discussion at the end of the tenancy.
How do you define wear and tear? Because I think a lot of people have a different view in their head. How does my deposits and
Okay, all right. So
How long have you got?
Well, just
How long have you
briefly,
got?
because I think landlords want to know about what wear and tear
So is a scratch on a tabletop wear and tear, or is it damage?
A scratch, a deep scratch would be damage.
Okay.
But
Right.
actually, you don't need to replace a table for that. So
No.
the landlord wouldn't be able to claim for a replacement. They would just be able to claim a portion of the damage, as long as it's not a scratch
Yeah.
across the whole table,
Yeah.
or a leg hasn't fallen off. You know, so it's about proportionality.
Right.
Okay. Then there's five quick criteria for wear and tear, since you asked at this point. We're talking about how old is the item, what was the quality of the item at the beginning, and what was its condition at the beginning, which very often we don't know those 2 out of 3 of those as adjudicators. So landlords need to be wise to their own properties. If they're student properties, they may not put in the same quality as you would if you were a one property landlord renting to a family or professional couple or whatever it might be, you know, depending on the spec of the property. So wear and tear will have different life spans, and that's one of the other criteria we look at on certain things, depending on your tenant. And then the length of the tenancy, you have to remember, is relevant. Now, obviously, with what's, you know, with Section 21 not being there, how long a tenancy is going to last? So that brings me on to the third point, actually, about protecting your property from the beginning, which means doing regular inspections at the right time. 3 to
Having
6
landlord
monthly.
insurance.
Having landlord insurance.
Insurance.
Total landlord insurance, plug.
Plug, indeed. But also remembering that if you have got specialist equipment, an oak table that you're leaving in a furnished property, or something specialist that needs a special type of cleaning, that you're giving all of those instructions right at the beginning to make sure that your property is being looked after in the way that you want it to be looked after. And the tenant is aware of that.
But isn't that's part of the problem sometimes? Because if you think about landlords, especially the smaller accidental landlords, don't see themselves as landlords, and they used to live in the property. They have an emotional tie.
They do.
To that, and obviously that furniture is of a higher spec. So anything that's happened, any small little thing that's happened, damage, whatever,
it's their grandmother's table being
it's
trashed.
magnified.
Yeah.
It's magnified, which is why it's so important to have a good inventory. Yeah?
But also, so am I right in saying that not everyone gets inventories? Do you find that?
Less so.
Oh, good.
I think people do. Look, remember, we only see the problem cases.
Yeah,
We don't see
when it
the
goes Pete
majority.
Tong.
Yeah, the peach on at the top.
That's the
Yeah.
one. That's the one. So, inventories still come in a variety of forms, yeah? But the ones we do see are better
Okay.
than they used to be. I mean, when I started 17 years ago, they were on the back of an envelope. They were,
Or just some
they didn't
photographs,
have-
right?
Properties didn't have walls and doors, you know, it was just the furniture.
But on inventories, I mean, obviously there's really good companies like No Letting Go that are professional companies, and a lot of agents, they use inventory companies, and landlords do.
Yes.
A lot of agents do it themselves. I don't know what your thought is on that.
Okay, well,
She said wading into deeper waters.
Deeper waters here. When, again, training others, and I do get asked that question a lot, do I have to use a third party? And actually, no. It's about the quality of the inventory and the detail that you put into it. Because even a professional company, and I'm not naming any names, can provide a poor inventory, the clerk didn't have a good day.
Mm.
You know, they miss things.
But what's the view? Obviously, you're head of disputes and resolutions here. What's the view if a I mean, one of my talks, I did over 50 talks last year, and I say to landlords, don't do an inventory yourself. You're bad, right? Because they don't know what they're doing a lot of the time, and obviously the detail and the evidence detail. What's the view from a deposit provider's adjudication if a landlord does an inventory themselves? It's just the quality of the inventory.
So there used to be, going back in time, there used to be a massive difference because we didn't have all the tech out
Yes.
there.
Mm.
Yeah,
There is AI
apps
out there,
now,
yeah.
And video.
all the apps now, the video, the
Phone.
quality of video, and landlords did not appreciate what it needed to look like.
And
Now
also,
there's much
it didn't
more
really
education.
matter because they didn't have to adhere to the rules as much as they used to, did they? So now, if you want to reduce, take away from a deposit, you have to prove it by saying this X, Y, and Z is damaged. Therefore,
And here's the evidence.
here's the evidence. The old days, before the deposit laws came in,
Yeah.
which is a long time now ago, they didn't have to do that because
But
they
I
just used to take
used
it
to-
anyway, didn't they?
I used to have to go to court.
Yeah.
So that I actually think out of all the legislation that's come in, the deposit scheme legislation was most probably the best bit of legislation.
Agreed.
Because unfortunately landlords think that the deposit is their money when it's not their money.
No.
So that you'd have all these spurious court cases happening. Now the deposit scheme stopped all that. Correct?
Yes.
You did.
Yes, massively. It's taken a long time for landlords to understand that, but yeah, it's. But
And that legislation only came in 2007.
I know.
And we've got the Renters' Rights Bill coming up.
Yeah. Tenant fee
Where
act.
is that going to take us?
Well, this is it. So it would be interesting to know if more regulation of the industry, which is where that takes us, will lead to more knowledge amongst landlords. Do you think that will happen?
I think that the landlords will have no choice, but I think as Paul knows and the press knows that landlords are selling up. Whether they're selling it to portfolio landlords or not, we're not quite. You might know more than
It's
I.
a mix and
whether-
match.
Mix and match.
Yeah, mix and match.
I quite like the argument that, in fact, there's not landlords leaving the sector, it's that landlords are always leaving the sector, but there aren't any new ones coming up to replace them. And some portfolio
And it's been
reductions.
accelerated.
And it's been accelerated.
And we've got a lack of stock.
Yeah.
I think it's the lack of stock and the fact that landlords need to get their head around not having Section 21 and being able to get their property back without having a really good reason for doing so
And relying on the courts.
and relying on the courts, which is, yes, remains to be seen how they're set up.
It's fascinating because I think there's if you're a landlord who has had to evict someone in the past, and it's not easy on a good day, then I think they're hypersensitive to this and they're much more aware and are much more likely to be thinking about setting up. Whereas if you're a landlord who's never had to evict anyone, you're quite often ignorant as to what might be hitting you.
Yeah, it's true. And I think you're right. And don't forget, you might have, most tenants leave of their own accord.
Yeah, most tenants do.
And if you served a notice, the tenant has left. And most landlords have never, ever, ever had to use a Section 8. They've used a Section 21, which is a fallback plan. So that is going to be a whole minefield in itself. Pleadings, getting the notices correctly.
From me dealing with resolution and conflict, I think the biggest tip for anybody out there is to make sure you do regular inspections.
Okay.
Yeah, every
Which would mean
3-4 monthly,
3 more, okay.
up to 6 monthly. Make sure you're going into your property. The longer that tenancy goes on, the more chances your property is going to deteriorate due to wear and tear, but not necessarily due to anything the tenant does. But you need to keep an eye on it.
But isn't
And
that's a problem though, isn't it? In some sense, I'm talking about access. Because you talk ideally, tenants giving consent to go to the property, great with their consent. Making sure that you don't have 25 people living there in a subletting scam and all that type of stuff.
6 dogs.
Yeah, or hoarding and all that stuff. We've seen it all, and and I tried to expose it on the programme that I did. I think the issue that I had is that I actually wanted the right of access to become a ground in Section 8. I was fighting for that. It's not. You have to go under ground 12. But if a tenant won't give you access, that's an issue, isn't it, Susie?
Yes, and not one you can do anything about, unfortunately. The law doesn't let you go in without permission. So I think it remains to be seen how you can deal with it, but at any stage, remember, you can negotiate with your tenant There's lots of ways. Mediation is one. We were talking about before we even started recording this. To deal with that tenant and ask them.
And on mediation, we talk about mediation because it is important, and the government want mediation to be part of the court process or the possession process. You know, what we did, I remember when I drove the staff, obviously I drive the staff mad quite most of the time here, but what I did during COVID, I said we need to set up a mediation service. We did that with Susie and Mike and the others, because obviously there was an eviction ban for 6 months, and landlords were stuck and tenants weren't doing anything, weren't paying the rent. So we've got a really good mediation service at the Property Redress. Maybe you can highlight that a bit more, but basically doing deals with tenants makes decent commercial sense, doesn't it?
It does, and it actually, like any mediation, you know, or any negotiation, if there's a win-win, lose-lose situation on both sides, that's a win. You know, everybody's happy, parties can move on, and the mediation we do here is actually very low-key and very informal, and it works.
If you had to put your finger on the most common issue that you mediate, could you put a finger on it, or on them, or it?
It is generally, I would say, about paying rent, going into rent arrears. You know, tenant then can't pay their rent or doesn't want to, can't ever see themselves making it up, so they get themselves into a hole.
Yeah, or what we do, which is I think is really good, and it makes total commercial sense, especially now. The reality is when you go to court in the new world, or even now, you're looking at a year's rent arrears, is that when you've got 3-4 months rent arrears, write off the rent arrears, and the tenant leaves in 28-30 days, sign a deed of surrender. That's good business.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was just wondering, because I assume someone watching this is going, when am I likely to get involved in mediation? I'm a landlord, I've never evicted anyone. In reality, it is going to be because they eventually get a tenant who gets behind in
rent, or that they want to negotiate something on some level. And
that's the arrears service you're talking about?
Yeah, we're a third party, so we have no emotion, we have no skin in the game.
Yeah.
Landlord's tenant fractured, he said, she said, you know, we get in there, we work it out, we speak to both parties, we try and bang their heads together, and actually, it's not just financial. You've got to realise being a landlord is difficult, right? It strains your mental health as well. If you've got a problem tenant who's fracturing your property or doing all this, and you're in for a year, not just a year's rent arrears, and you've got to pay more. A year of grief, interest rate's gone up. It's a year of grief. So it's about, you know, boxing clever, isn't it, Susie?
Well, yeah, and we want those landlords to stay in the market as much as possible.
Definitely.
You know, shortage of stock. You know. When is new stock going to be around? We don't know. But that's another segue.
Into,
I may say,
number 5.
Number 4.
Oh, 4, sorry.
You haven't done 4.
You get ahead of yourself, not
Lord.
Maintain your relationships with that tenant during the tenancy. If they're having a problem, make sure what I said in number 1, be approachable. Yeah, be willing to have a conversation with them. Those regular inspections will help maintain that relationship. If you're employing an agent to do them, then make sure the agent is feeding back to you. Don't, you know, I think, Paul, my experience is that sometimes landlords think the agent can do it all and they don't want to hear anything. And I think that sometimes that disconnect with the agent and the property can be a problem.
But isn't it an argument? Right, I'm playing devil's advocate because you know I'm not controversial anyway, right?
In the least.
Isn't it an argument? I'm paying my agent a full management fee.
Yes.
Right? They're giving me a peace of mind.
Yes.
I don't want to hear that the tenant, you know, has lost his keys at 5 a.m. I'm paying you to do that.
Yep.
Isn't there an argument to say, well, that's what I'm paying my agent for, Susie?
Yes. But how much are you paying your agent? Did you do a really good deal? And is your agent as good as you think they are?
Well, the thing is, in defence of agents now, you know, you do the referencing, you're methodical with the referencing, and obviously we have complaints at the Property Redress about agents not doing the right referencing and stuff. But the thing, then there's an argument to say, well, I didn't know that the couple were going to have a big fight, or he's got a drug problem, or whatever it may be in month 6 of a 12-month tenancy agreement. So, you know, it's hard for agents because, of course, as an agent, you have to be a compliance officer, a mediator, a social worker, a credit controller, all these different
As
things.
a managing agent, though, the Property Redress do see lots of complaints about lack of service provided by the agent.
Yes, correct.
So they haven't done regular inspections, which is in their management
Most
contract.
definitely.
Yeah.
There are a few different common problems that agents are not doing their due diligence. They're not fulfilling the contract that they've got with their landlord. So landlords need to be very aware that they are looking and employing quality agents.
So that's why, and I say I have a slide in my talks where, finding the right letting agent is worth its weight in gold. It's the most important, one of the most important decisions of running a successful portfolio or let, because of course there's 10 agents down the high street. Who do you pick? And that's where you have to take your time. There's no substitute for having 2 or 3 other landlords that will recommend an agent. I mean, you got, and then you go on all agents or reviews and all that type of stuff. But we do have a lot of complaints from consumers, landlords and tenants about members, and I think the biggest complaint, not just holding deposits, is poor management and communication, isn't it?
Yeah. So it goes back actually to the first point that I made. But build the right foundation. It starts before you even.
So I assume you would, if you are going to sign a contract with a letting agency to manage your property fully, it would say in that what the service level agreement is. And that would include, we don't get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, the tenant is by themselves. If they lock themselves out, thank you very much. We charge extra for that, or and all, that's stuff you're talking about. So, but does everyone do that? Do you find that people don't? They haven't really had a frank discussion with their agent before all that happens.
Paul would know more about upfront sort of signing up an agent, employing an agent. I think for us at Property Redress particularly, it's agents have not done what they said they would do, that they haven't complied with their own agreement.
Right.
I think
not managed the property correctly.
Right.
I think also that it's a bigger industry problem, because of course you have lots of letting agents out there. Now, for an agent to try and find landlords is the hardest ever done. I mean, I go up and down the country training agents on how to attract landlords to your business. The reality is when you get smaller, newer agents, and they're maybe less experienced, they don't realise the amount. I mean, if you think about how much time a letting agent or a landlord self-management spends in a 6 or 12-month tenancy hours, it's hours and hours and hours. And I think,
really hard job.
And then, of course, if you look at agents, what they charge, historically, it's very cheap. If you work it out on an hourly rate, it's peanuts. And the problem is the industry has dictated how much an agent charges, because in normal other industries, they'd be charging a lot more.
Yeah. So I think it's 10%, isn't it?
It's 10, 12, 14, 15% full management.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the time now, I think the days of an agent doing let only should be dying down.
I think they are, aren't they? Yeah.
Well, they should be. No agent should be doing that.
So, your point number 5.
My point number 5, my last one, is handling issues proactively. So whenever something crops up, whenever your tenant lets you know there's a problem, or your agent has done an inspection for you and seen something that maybe needs attention, that you deal with it at the time, if at all possible. It avoids things compounding, issues growing as tenancies go on. And then when you do want to discuss a deposit when the tenancy is ending, then there's a problem because maybe the deposit isn't big enough. Yeah. So if you discover something the tenant has done or should have done and hasn't, have a discussion with them. Or has there been a leak where actually the landlord is responsible? So that can be dealt with at the time. And maybe I'm just thinking back to cases we've done in the past where the landlord's refused to redecorate after a leak. He's fixed the leak, but then he's refused to redecorate, and then tries to charge the tenant at the end.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's wrong.
Because that's the difference between start and end. It wasn't there at the beginning.
And that's a really good point, Susie. Just quickly, I want to, if you can explain to our listeners what's betterment. Explain what betterment is, just briefly, because landlords try it on as a betterment, and I think people don't understand about this in the industry.
Let's say we have a new fridge, right? We have a Beco fridge.
Oh, yeah.
It's functional, it's good budget model, whatever it might be. The landlord, at the end of the tenancy, says, well, the tenant's broken the drawer, the light's not coming on, I need a new fridge, right? Just so happens, we know from the communications, for example, that the landlord's also going to be moving back, right?
He wants a new fridge.
He wants a new fridge, firstly, and then he puts in an estimate for a smeg fridge.
Right.
That's a very clear estimate.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
The hardest one for us to judge is maybe carpet, because we will never know what quality of carpet is on that floor. A picture doesn't tell
really
you
do
what
it, does it? No.
quality is.
It's funny actually. You just sparked it. And I know we're coming to the end. When we do so many different disputes, I think we've done like 9,500 last year adjudications.
On my
just for my deposits. So I think we took over 138,000 calls.
Wow.
Our call centre from landlords, tenants, letting agents on deposits. It's amazing. I think the call time, believe it or not, is 2 seconds that we pick up the phone.
Yes,
It's phenomenal,
really,
absolutely
really
phenomenal.
good.
Yeah.
It's amazing. We get the strangest things that happen. We get stuff sent in, don't we, on complaints? Didn't we have bed bugs that were sent into the office?
Yeah, so we had a jiffy bag arrive, A4 jiffy bag, with a piece of curtain in there. There was a curtain saying this is where the bugs nested or something, and they'd cut a piece of curtain. And we do stress, don't send us physical evidence, but you know.
Yeah.
Because it's emotive, isn't it?
It's emotive, yeah, they're very upset by it.
Yeah, of course. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. That has been fascinating talking to you, because it is a rich world in which you swim, rich waters in which you swim, to use a comparison. So if there was one magic wand you could wave over the industry, or maybe even 2 wands, what would it be?
Well, I would say in an ideal world, every tenant would have the home that they want, wherever they want it, and at an affordable rent for them. And every landlord would have the perfect tenant who looks after the property and pays their rent. So for me, if there was one thing I would like to think about, is to make sure there are enough homes for all prospective tenants. And we know that is not happening. And I would also really like to move away from landlord and tenant, and maybe talk about property owners and property occupiers.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know what? Let's get you in Parliament.
Oh,
We're feeling the love, Susie.
Okay.
Angela, are you listening? Thank you very much indeed. That was really fascinating.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, thank you very much indeed, Susie. Much appreciated for your time today. And also to Paul Shaplina, as always, founder of Landlord Action. And I thank myself, Nigel Lewis, head of content at LandlordZONE.
I'm going to thank your mother as well.
She will be watching, believe me. And we say thank you to you for watching as well. We appreciate that. And remember to visit LandlordZONE for the latest and breaking news.